So you've only got a minute or two to grab the attention of the audience. What do? Blow something up, tell them all that your favourite captain's dead, or just have people slightly change their uniforms? Let's find out. I'm Sean Ferrick for Trek Culture, and here are the 10 best Star Trek cold opens. Number 10. Take Everything They Have in A Mirror Darkly Part 1. Star Trek Enterprise only visited the Mirror Universe for one story late in its 4th season. In A Mirror Darkly kicks off at high tempo without any warning to ease the audience in. We're greeted with the famous scene of the Tiplana Hath descending from the clouds, coming to a rest in Bozeman, Montana. James Cromwell's Zephram Cochrane steps out of the assembled crowd, walking toward the gangplank that has appeared from the ship. So far, it is the exact scene of First Contact, lifted from the film of the same name. However, there's a small addition. A bearded man looks uncertainly at his companion. The Vulcan raises their hand and issues their famous catchphrase. Cochrane raises his hand, then dips under his jacket and pulls out a shotgun, which the unfortunate Vulcan ends up on the business end of. The scene then switches from glorious First Contact to dizzyingly off-kilter, which is of course exactly the intention. You can almost hear the writers' team laughing as the newly revamped, darker opening credits start to roll. Number 9. All hands abandon ship, cause and effect. When in doubt, blow up the Enterprise. It may sound like a joke, but someone obviously wrote it on a whiteboard and ran with it when it came to the Next Generation's 5th season episode, Cause and Effect. The cold open begins with the nacelle blowing out, venting plasma into space, setting the ship up for a spin. Dr. Crusher reports that there are casualties all over the ship, while the rest of the bridge crew try and handle the turbulence that the ship is facing. Ensign Rowe attempts to steady the Enterprise, but to no avail. Captain Picard gives a panicked order, telling all crew to get to the escape pods and abandon ship. It's too late, and the Enterprise D explodes in a huge fireball in space. All of this before the opening credits. We were shocked. There was no other word for it. Surely not. Could this be the way the producers thought to end this show, clearing the path for Deep Space Nine to come around less than a year later? Seems a bit harsh perhaps, but on the other hand, killing all of the principal crew would have been a good way to keep the costs down. From the accounting department's point of view, we sure hope this wasn't a time loop episode. Number 8. Rainy Night in the Bayou, The Visitor. The Visitor opens with one of the quieter cold intros on this list. An old man sits alone in his home while a storm rages outside, quietly injecting himself with something. The camera pans across a photo of Captain Sisko and Jake before coming to settle on the baseball that all Deep Space Nine enthusiasts would instantly recognize. The chiming doorbell rouses the man, who goes to find a young woman attempting to shelter from the storm. This young woman has come to find the great writer Jake Sisko to learn everything that she can from him. The old man, now of course revealed us as Jake in the future, ponders this, musing that had it been any other night, he would have sent her away. However, on this night, he chooses to tell her the story of how he lost his father. That's the clincher. This is the story of how Ben Sisko died when Jake was still a teenager, which means the Ben that we, the audience, know is soon about to have his clock punched. Fade to credits. It's quiet and it's calm, and it's one of the most instantly intriguing stories in the show's history. Number 7. Commander T'Pol, Twilight. Enterprise's 3rd season was a game changer for the show. While time has certainly helped the first 2 years gain momentum and audience appreciation, it was the Xindi arc that truly breathed fresh life into the series. Twilight was an outstanding episode in an outstanding season, taking the idea of there but for the grace to a new level. Before the twist was revealed after the opening credits, Archer wakes up in his bed with the ship in the middle of a dogfight. Confused, he stumbles to the bridge to find T'Pol, now clad in a Starfleet commander's uniform, sitting in the captain's chair. He's understandably a little confused. That's where his bum normally goes after all, but neither have any time to dwell, though she quickly orders him to return to his quarters as Xindi superweapon arrives and destroys Earth. Yes, Earth, that same planet that Enterprise is from, and the same one the crew has been spending the entire season attempting to defend. In a heartbeat, it implodes, sending huge chunks of rock hurtling into space, dooming all who were still down below. It's a hell of a way to start an episode, but thankfully, Russell Watson is there to cool the panicked hordes down only a moment later. Number 6. The impact of the Voyager encounter, Living Witness. The Starship Voyager had travelled a good 15,000 light years by the time Living Witness aired, so audiences were quite used to seeing the ship as a beacon of the Federation, despite its Delta Quadrant setting. So it came as a bit of a shock when Captain Janeway stood in her ready room espousing the benefits of violence. Living Witness is as close to a Voyager episode set in the Mirror Universe as we ever got, showing an alternate history of the crew. Chakotay was almost entirely covered by a tattoo, the Doctor was an android, Kazon were clad in Starfleet uniforms. This was an assault to the senses. The episode opens with Janeway making a deal that sees whole cities wiped out via biogenic weapons, following, as she calls it, the Starfleet way. Everything about this opening was so wrong that it knocks the audience completely off balance, sucking them in as they wait to find out what exactly is going on. It may not have been the show that we were used to seeing for the previous 4 seasons, but a show that can't shock is a show that's gone soft. Number 5. I am too old for your bullshit, Q. Penance. Star Trek Picard's second season opened with a bang, flinging Jean-Luc across the quadrant and back into his lovely French chateau. The second episode of the season, Penance, dials his confusion up to 90 in one of the strongest openings in Picard's entire run to date. With a tour de force performance by John Delancey, Q proves that he's back to cause mayhem with a twist. Is there anything more unsettling than realizing that a being with the powers of a god is acting a little out of sorts? There's both a sadness and a deep sense of shock radiating from Picard as he tries to first express his annoyance, then his concern with his old foe. The scene contains the great line from Q, "How provincial, how yesterday's Enterprise of you." What follows, the skull scene, has already become an iconic moment in recent Trek history. Seeing Skull Dukat, Martok, Sarek and Zek all in the same room, more or less, was a ballsy way to make an intro to the audience. Q's taunt that he won't leave Picard alone to deal with the mess he's found himself in sees us to the credits, but not before a quick cameo from Alex Steele's synthetic being, now ominously renamed Harvey. Number 4, you know why I have come, Captain. The Menagerie, Part 1. The Menagerie was the original series' only 2-part episode, and effectively serves as a clip show. The scenes that are reused from The Cage, the first pilot to the show, serve to tell the story of Spock's relationship with Captain Christopher Pike, Kirk's predecessor. The episode opens with Kirk, Spock and McCoy beaming down to Starbase 11, following a summons from Starfleet. The first hint of what's to come drops when crewman Piper reveals the base sent no such summons, leaving the officers confused as to why exactly they're present. We're introduced to both Commodore Mendez and then Fleet Captain Pike, horribly crippled and confined to the now infamous chair, complete with blinking lights. This opening sets up a terrific mystery, though it truly succeeds in the reveal that Spock, of all people, is the one responsible for the duplicity. He faked the signal so that the Enterprise would arrive. Ignoring Pike's repeating lights, he promises to help his former captain in the only way he knows how. This was Spock! Spock! There was no crewman or officer more dependable, none more trustworthy, and here he was admitting to treason and mutiny. Though precious little details were revealed before the opening credits, this remains one of the most intriguing scenes in the entire run of the original series. Number 3. Computer, what date is it? In the Pale Moonlight. There really is no getting around the fact that In the Pale Moonlight really is as good as it's hyped up to be. For an episode that does so much for Star Trek as a whole, though particularly for Deep Space Nine, anyone would be forgiven for thinking its impact would lessen over the years. The opening scene is proof enough to show that this isn't so. Ben Sisko is talking to the camera. Wait, no, he's talking to the computer, trying to begin his captain's log. He can't remember the date. He asks, then discovers that something only happened 2 weeks previously. We're shown flashes of him posting casualty lists in the war room, while the crew discusses the frequency of Dominion incursions via Romulan space. There it is. Light goes off over Sisko's head. For the first time in Star Trek's history, a Starfleet officer openly admits to warmongering and using underhanded methods to bring a foreign power into a war that will cost millions of lives. The rest of the episode doesn't let up, with the final scene being one of the strongest in the show's entire run. That opening is a true masterpiece. Number 2, We Are the Borg, Scorpion, Part 1. As a fan, the impact of the cold open to Scorpion Part 1 has never diminished. It's a scene that only works if the audience buys into the history of the franchise, particularly as it's so short, clocking in at under 60 seconds. The Borg were long considered the deadliest enemy in Star Trek, perhaps surpassed only by the Q had they ever decided to go berserk. In addition to this, no more than a single cube had ever been seen on screen at any one time. Therefore, the establishing shot of 2 of these nightmare geometrical monsters was enough to make any viewer's muscles tighten on the spot. We are the Borg. The customary greeting, and so often the final words that anyone would hear, the absolute gut punch of seeing a couple of strands of what looks like alien phaser fire completely annihilate the ships was one of the biggest shocks in Star Trek's history, even more than that time two salamanders made history. As Lieutenant Paris would ask with shock a little later in the episode, what could do this to the Borg? What indeed, Tom? What indeed? Number 1. A warrior's drink, Yesterday's Enterprise. Yesterday's Enterprise is an episode that has been covered so many times on this channel that there is a danger of everything having already been said. However, indulge me a moment, because the cold open is a masterclass in building tension. Worf's conversation with Guinan is so innocuous, while also setting up his lifelong prune juice addiction, that it could easily be from any light episode of the series. Then the singularity appears outside 10 Forward's windows, leading Worf to report quickly to the bridge, while Guinan's extra senses cause her to exclaim, "No." She was right to be concerned, at least when it comes to Worf. He observes a ship coming through the rift, then everything shimmers. The bridge is darker, the uniforms are a different cut, and everybody's favourite Klingon is nowhere to be seen. Instead, a familiar blonde officer stands in his place. The return of Tasha Yar would have been material enough for any cold open to shock the audience. However, the fact that it builds again to that great reveal of the Ambassador class Enterprise C, this is easily one of the greatest openings to a Star Trek episode, while also making a decent argument for being one of the greatest openings in television history. That's everything for our list, folks. Do you reckon we missed any? Let us know. This is clearly a list that demands a sequel. You can catch us over on Twitter at Trek Culture or on Instagram at Trek Culture YT. You can catch myself at Sean Ferrick on the various socials. You can catch our lovely editor Tom at Tom C. Finn on Twitter as well. Until I hear from you again, folks, live long and prosper. Make sure that you practice infinite diversities in infinite combinations. You're all wonderful. Have a wonderful week. Make it so.